The average American chicken owner spends between $40 and $70 every month on commercial feed. That amounts to $500 to $800 a year just to keep a small backyard flock alive. However, there is a reality that the feed industry does not want you to consider. For over 800 years, medieval monasteries managed flocks of 100 chickens or more without spending a single coin on feed. Not one. They utilized a three-system method so effective that Charlemagne himself codified it into law. The most disturbing part is that this system was deliberately abandoned, not because it stopped working, but because you cannot sell feed to someone who does not need it. Around the year 800 AD, Emperor Charlemagne issued the Capitulare de Villis, a set of laws for managing every royal estate across his empire. Buried within its 70 chapters was a direct order. Every large farm must maintain a minimum of 100 chickens and 30 geese. Smaller farms were required to have at least 50 chickens and 12 geese. Now here's the critical detail. The Capitulare describes in meticulous detail what crops to grow, what trees to plant, what herbs to cultivate, and even how to manage beekeeping. But the concept of purchasing feed for these birds simply did not exist. These flocks were fed entirely from systems already built into the estate. This was not unique to Charlemagne. Christopher Dyer's analysis of medieval peasant records shows that the typical household kept a rooster and 5 to 7 hens. These were among the poorest people in society. They could not afford to buy feed. Yet poultry ownership was, in Dyer's words, almost universal. So how did they do it? The answer is visible in one of the most extraordinary documents in European history. The Plan of St. Gall, drawn around 820 AD, is the only surviving architectural blueprint from the entire early Middle Ages. It depicts a Benedictine monastery designed to be self-sufficient for over 100 monks, 115 visitors, and 150 workers. On this plan, the placement of the poultry yard reveals everything. The chickens and geese sit directly adjacent to the vegetable garden. The designers understood something modern agriculture has forgotten. Chickens are not a separate system that needs separate inputs. They are a living bridge between your garden waste and your food supply. The monastery's poultry turned scraps into eggs, meat, and fertilizer, which went right back into the garden. This was not accidental. It was engineered, and it ran on 3 interconnected systems. There is a detail that often goes unmentioned when people discuss the Plan of St. Gall. The chickens were never the whole picture. They were just one link in a chain of animals that fed each other. If you look at the full blueprint, not just the poultry section, you see something that will change how you think about livestock forever. Start at the orchard. The Plan of St. Gall lists 14 types of fruit and nut trees: apple, pear, quince, hazel, chestnut, and almond. These orchards were not just for the monks. They were designed as foraging grounds. Chickens roamed beneath the canopy, eating fallen fruit, insects, worms in the leaf litter, snails, slugs, and seeds from the ground cover. Archaeological research confirms that before the 10th century, European chickens were still close to their wild ancestor, the red jungle fowl. These were active, aggressive foragers, nothing like the passive indoor birds we know today. An orchard gave them a complete diet without a single handful of purchased grain. Now follow the chain. The geese lived on the pond. Charlemagne's law specifically required every royal mill to keep geese on its water. The geese ate aquatic plants, grass around the banks, and insects on the surface. Their droppings fell into the water and fertilized it. That fertilized water fed algae and aquatic plants, which fed the fish the monastery was also required to stock. The same pond that housed the geese produced carp, pike, and trout for the monks' table. One body of water, 2 sources of meat, 0 feed costs. But it does not stop there. The pigs are where this system becomes almost unbelievable. Medieval pigs were nothing like modern breeds. They were lean, long-legged, semi-wild animals, closer to wild boar than to anything you would see on a farm today. And they ate everything the other animals could not. Monastery records from across Europe show that pigs were fed whey from the cheese-making room, spent grain from the brewery, damaged vegetables from the garden, kitchen scraps too tough for poultry, and windfall acorns and beech nuts from the surrounding forest. The Domesday Book, compiled in 1086, measured the value of English woodland not in acres, but in how many pigs it could feed. A forest described as woodland for 300 swine was worth more than one listed as woodland for 100 swine. The entire economic value of a forest was calculated by its capacity to feed pigs for free. That is how central this system was to medieval life. And here is the part that closes the loop. Every one of these animals produced manure. Chicken droppings are among the richest natural fertilizers on Earth, packed with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Pig manure is outstanding for heavy-feeding crops like cabbages and root vegetables. Goose droppings fertilize the pond water. Even the fish contributed because when the monks cleaned their catch, the guts and bones went straight into the garden beds as fertilizer. The monastery kitchen garden at St. Gall was roughly 1/10 of an acre, with 18 raised beds, each 20 feet long and 5 feet wide. From this tiny patch of ground, enriched by the combined manure of every animal on the estate, a community of nearly 400 people received a significant portion of their vegetables. Modern gardeners using chemical fertilizer rarely match that productivity from the same footprint. This is what a living chain looks like. The orchard feeds the chickens, the pond feeds the geese and the fish, the forest feeds the pigs, the kitchen feeds every animal with its scraps, and every animal feeds the garden with its manure. The garden feeds the kitchen, and the cycle begins again. No feed store, no supply chain, no monthly bill, just biology doing what biology has done for thousands of years. Now, there is a third layer to this system, and it is the one that has been most completely erased from modern knowledge. Medieval monks and farmers did not just rely on scraps and foraging. They deliberately grew specific plants whose only purpose was to feed their animals. Not grain, not hay, but wild and semi-wild plants that grew aggressively, needed almost no care, and provided nutrition that rivals anything you can buy in a bag today. Comfrey was the backbone. This perennial plant produces enormous leaves that you can cut up to 8 times per year. It has more protein than most commercial feed blends, plus calcium, potassium, and phosphorus. It grows in shade, thrives in terrible soil, and once you plant it, it produces feed for decades without ever replanting. Chickens eat the leaves, and pigs eat the leaves. You can even toss it into the fish pond as supplemental feed. Medieval herb gardens consistently included comfrey, and its use as animal feed is documented across centuries of European agricultural records. Stinging nettle was the winter insurance policy. Rich in iron, vitamins, and omega-3 fatty acids, nettle could be harvested in summer, dried like hay, and crushed over animal feed during the cold months when nothing else was growing. One patch of nettle, properly managed, could supply winter feed supplements for an entire small farmstead. Then there are the plants that modern gardeners spend millions of dollars trying to destroy every year. Dandelion, whose deep roots pull calcium and minerals from the subsoil and concentrate them in the leaves. Lamb's quarters, whose old folk name fat hen literally tells you what it was for. Chickweed, named because chickens will devour every leaf they can find. Yellow dock, loaded with vitamin A and iron. Every single one of these is a perennial or an aggressive self-seeder. Every single one grows without fertilizer, without irrigation, and without any commercial input whatsoever. Every single one was a recognized and valued part of the medieval food system for both humans and animals. And every single one is now classified as a weed and sprayed with herbicides by the same industry that then sells you feed made from crops that require those same herbicides to grow. Think about that for a moment. If you are wondering whether this integrated system could actually scale, history already answered that question. In the 10th century, the demand for poultry and eggs did not just increase, it exploded, and the free feeding system handled it without breaking. In the mid-10th century, the Catholic Church enforced what historians call the Benedictine Reform. Among its many changes, this reform imposed strict fasting rules across all of Christian Europe. For roughly 130 days of every year, more than a third of the calendar, the consumption of meat from four-legged animals was banned. No beef, no pork, no lamb. But chickens have 2 legs, and eggs were not classified as meat. This massive population boom happened entirely within the integrated free-feeding system. There were no feed stores in the 10th century, no grain elevators, and no pelleted rations. The tens of millions of additional chickens that filled European farms after the Benedictine reform were all fed using the same living chain: orchards, ponds, forests, kitchen scraps, and forage plants. The system did not just survive the surge, it scaled effortlessly. Because when your feeding system is based on ecology instead of purchased inputs, adding more animals does not mean adding more costs. It means adding more links to the chain. The pigs still ate the forest acorns. The geese still grazed the pond banks. The fish still ate what grew in the fertilized water. And the new chickens simply joined the orchard rotation, the kitchen scrap cycle, and the comfrey patch alongside everything else. More manure meant a more productive garden, which meant more kitchen scraps, which supported even more animals. This is the fundamental difference between a living system and an industrial one. Everything the medieval monks used is still available today. Every plant, every animal, every principle. The living chain was not destroyed, it was buried under a business model, and you can dig it up starting this week. If you keep chickens, let them forage under any fruit trees you have. Even 2 or 3 apple trees provide fallen fruit, insects, and ground cover that will visibly cut your feed bill within the first month. If you do not have trees yet, plant them. Medieval monks chose apple, pear, cherry, plum, hazel, and chestnut. Every one of those species still exists and still supports livestock foraging underneath. If you have the space and local regulations allow it, consider adding geese to a pond or wet area. They maintain the grass, they eat aquatic weeds, and their droppings fertilize the water for fish. A small pond with a few geese and some stocked fish is not a hobby project. It is a medieval protein factory that runs itself. Every kitchen scrap that currently goes into your garbage belongs in this system instead. Vegetable trimmings, stale bread, leftover rice, cheese rind, and fruit peels. Position your coop near your garden and let the manure cycle start working. Your garden feeds your kitchen feeds your animals, and your animals feed your garden. And plant the forage crops. Comfrey takes 1 season to establish, then produces 8 harvests a year of high-protein feed for decades. Grow stinging nettle in a contained area. Harvest it in summer, dry it, and you have free winter feed supplements. Stop killing your dandelions and your lamb's quarters. They are not weeds. They are the same free feed system that sustained European agriculture for 800 years. The monks of St. Gall understood in 820 AD that no animal on a farm should be an isolated expense. Every creature is a link in a chain where waste becomes food, food becomes manure, and manure becomes more food. The only people who need you to forget this are the ones who profit from breaking the chain and selling each link back to you separately. If this changes how you think about feeding livestock, there is a lot more buried knowledge where this came from. I have been researching the agricultural systems that sustain European civilization for over 1,000 years, and what I keep finding is the same pattern. Methods that worked for centuries were abandoned, not because they failed, but because they could not be monetized. If this exploration of ancient agricultural wisdom has changed the way you look at your backyard or the weeds in your garden, please subscribe and like this video. We are dedicated to uncovering the history and the systems that they tried to bury. Let's grow a more self-sufficient future together. The next treasury of forgotten knowledge will be opened very soon.